Hello everyone, Rebecca here from Stocking My Pantry, and in today's video I'm going to be making and canning Salsa Ranchera from the all-new Ball Book of Canning and Preserving. I will be canning it in my Nesco canner, but you can use any water bath or a steam canner that you have. Okay, so before I get into the actual process of making the salsa, I want to just go over the ingredients with you. One reason I chose this recipe is because it has really simple ingredients. Doesn't have a lot, doesn't even have really a lot of spices, which I was tempted to kind of tinker with it a little bit, but the first time I make something, I pretty much like to stick with it just as it's written in the book. So anyway, let's go over what those ingredients are. Okay, so you have 3 pounds of Roma tomatoes, 3/4 of a pound of jalapeno peppers. Now I actually bought a bag of that said 8 ounces of jalapenos, and when I got them home I weighed it just to make sure I wasn't using too many, and it's actually only 5 ounces. So obviously that's less than 3/4 of a pound, but jalapenos are a low acid food, and in a water bath or steam recipe you can use less of a low acid food. You cannot use more of it, and I think that this is going to be enough to make it a good spice level for me and my family. Okay, so I'm using a little bit less, but it does call for 3/4 of a pound of jalapeno peppers. If you prefer, you can use a different type of pepper. Like if you want it more mild, you can use something like poblano peppers. Okay, and it also calls for 4 garlic cloves. I realized that I don't have any garlic cloves. I thought I did, but I have this minced garlic. It also calls for 2 teaspoons of salt. I am using pickling and canning salt, but you can use any non-iodized salt. A 1/2 cup of chopped cilantro. I haven't chopped it yet. I will do that while the vegetables are roasting. More on that in just a minute. And 1/3 of a cup of lime juice. So another thing that I love about this recipe is that you roast the vegetables, and roasting vegetables just gives them an awesome flavor. So I think that the salsa is going to have more flavor just because of the fact that the vegetables have been roasted. Okay, so let's go into the process of making this salsa. Okay, and so you just cut the cores out of all of the tomatoes, and I'm going to put them on this little pan. Now, one thing that I wanted to say, and I'll just go ahead and say this now. It calls to peel the onion and cut it into thick slices. The roasting pan that I'm using is a little bit small, so I'm going to cut it a little bit differently. But before I forget, I want to say I'm using this small roasting pan because it is really, really hot where I live. It's over 100 degrees right now. I don't want to use my big oven, so I'm using my countertop oven. So everything's going to be a little bit compressed in this pan, but just from a heat perspective, I think it'll be worth it. Okay, so we're going to core all of the tomatoes. And I'm going to quarter this onion. Peel this onion and quarter it. Or actually, I'll probably kind of cut it in wedges because I want it to be as small as possible. Whew, that's making me cry. So that it'll roast better, but also if it's in chunks, I can kind of intersperse it on the baking sheet. And I could fit more than if I was slicing it in thick slices. I'm also going to put the jalapeno peppers on the baking sheet. One way I'm doing this a little bit differently than the recipe calls for, I mentioned the garlic. If I was using garlic cloves, I would put the 4 garlic cloves on the baking sheet. And yes, I'm closing my eyes because I can't keep them open right now. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish coring the tomatoes, and then I'll show you what everything looks like on the tray before I pop it into the oven. Okay, now the instructions say to preheat the oven to 425. Arrange the first 4 ingredients, which are the tomatoes, the jalapeno, the onion, and the garlic, which, as I said, I'm using this instead, so I'm not putting it on the sheet. And then on a baking sheet lined with aluminum foil, bake at 425 degrees for 20 minutes. Remove the garlic from the baking sheet. Bake 20 minutes more or until vegetables are very soft and beginning to char. Now, since I am not putting the garlic on the baking sheet, I don't need to remove it, obviously, at 20 minutes. So the bottom line is roast them for a total of 40 minutes at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 220 degrees Celsius. And if you're using garlic cloves, to take them out at the 20-minute mark. Okay, I will take a picture of it halfway through so you can see what they look like at 20 minutes. And then I'll bring you back when they're all the way done roasting. See you in just a bit. Okay, the vegetables have been roasting for 40 minutes and you can see that they are slightly charred as the instructions called for. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the jalapenos in this bowl with the plastic lid. The instructions say to put it in a bowl and put plastic wrap on it. But to me, this is just a little easier and it will achieve the same end result. And that is that the peppers will steam and it will be easy to get the peels off. Okay, so they're supposed to sit for about 15 minutes. And in the meantime, what you're supposed to do is remove the peels from the tomatoes, and they should just pull off. Don't know how well you can see that, but they just pull right off. And obviously they're very hot, but I'm just going to go through and carefully peel off all the skins off of the tomatoes. And then what we'll do is chop up the tomatoes and the onion, and then at this point I'll also put the garlic into a stainless steel pot. I'll bring you back once I have taken the peels off of all of the tomatoes, and we will get to chopping up the onions and the tomatoes while we're waiting for the peppers to steam. Okay, so I believe that I've got all of the peels off. You can see I have the bowl of the peels here. If I missed a couple of little spots, then I'll notice that when I'm cutting them up, and I'll take them off at that time. I'm going to start by cutting up the onions because while they're hot, they are not as hot as the tomatoes. As you can imagine, the tomatoes are extremely, extremely hot. If need be, you can let them cool a little bit because after all, you have 15 minutes for the peppers to steam. I really don't think it's going to take that long. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start cutting up the onion. And I think it just said to roughly chop it, so I'm not worrying about them getting tiny. Okay. So the tomatoes are still hot, but they are nothing like they were, so I think I can handle them now. And obviously it'll be really easy to dice them up. They're super soft. I did, when I was roasting the tomatoes and the onions, there was a lot of juice coming out, and this pan was only so big, so some of it started boil over. So I did dump some of that out. It has a great flavor, but I don't think I'm going to add it to the salsa because that would just water it down. You know, even though this recipe takes a while because of the roasting, it's really an easy recipe. Like, this was an easy way to peel tomatoes, which you need to do when you're canning, and not to mention imparting a good flavor. So the tomatoes and onions are all cut up and put into this pot. And I'm just going to refer to the instructions. Okay, so it says coarsely chop the onion, place tomato, onion, and salt in a medium stainless steel or enameled saucepan. Okay, so this is interesting. It says, meanwhile, remove the skins from the tomatoes and coarsely chop. Coarsely chop onion. Place tomato, onion, and salt in a medium stainless steel or enameled saucepan. Peel peppers and remove and discard the seeds if desired. Finally, chop the peppers and the cooled garlic and add to the tomato mixture. Okay, so since we add the garlic to the tomato mixture, I'm just going to go ahead and put it in now. I looked to see if there was any steps like starting to simmer it first or anything like that, and there is not. Now, one thing to notice is that you don't put in the cilantro or the lime juice. You do that a little bit later, in fact, after you simmer it. And hopefully it was on camera, but I just added the tomatoes and the onions, the salt, and the garlic to the pot. I'm going to go ahead and take out my jalapenos. And I've got a little baggie here that I'm using like in place of a glove. I'm going to just take off the skins. Yeah, and see, the nice thing is once they're cooked to this degree, the skins really do just slip right off. And I'm going to cut the tips off, and I'm also going to remove the seeds to the best of my ability. And okay, so I had a little interruption. My mom and dog and everything came in. And so anyway, while I was cutting this open, I wasn't recording, but I just basically cut open the peppers, and they're a little bit difficult actually to get the seeds out because they are so soft. So I'm just going to have to do the best I can because personally I don't really want the seeds in. I don't really want the heat as much as the flavor. So I'm just going to do the best I can with getting them off. Again, using this little baggie in place of a glove so that I'm not touching them any more than I have to. And of course the veins are what really have the heat. But anyway, so this might be a little bit spicy, but I am using less peppers than it called for, and so I think it'll be fine. Okay, so I still have a fair amount of the veins and the seeds, but we'll see how it goes. The good news is if it's really spicy, then that just means we put less on things, right? So just gonna dice these up, and I'm gonna put these in the pot. Then I'm gonna go wash my hands to get rid of any thing that I will regret if I rub my eyes or my nose. Put those in, and then we'll get this heating up, and then we'll jar it up. So I'll bring it back in just a second. Okay, so now it says to bring this salsa to a boil, stirring often. And then once it comes to a boil, we will reduce the heat and simmer it for 2 minutes. One thing that I wanted to mention is that it says that this recipe will make 4-pint jars. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking there's no way it's going to make 4-pint jars. One thing to be aware of is that you can use a smaller size jar than the recipe calls for. You can't use a larger size jar. So for example, you couldn't can this in quarts because the recipe states pints. However, you can do 1/2 pints just fine. One thing to keep in mind though, if you use a smaller size jar, then you still use the same processing time. Okay, you can see it's starting to boil, or at least here. So I'm going to turn the burner down to a 2. We'll see how that goes, if it stays simmering like that, and we will simmer for 2 minutes. But one thing that I wanted to mention about the jar size is you still may use the same processing time even though you're using smaller jars. Now obviously sometimes a recipe will give you an option of pints or 1/2 pints or whatever, and if that's the case it will tell you a different processing time, at least potentially, for the smaller jar. In this case, since there is no processing time for 1/2 pints, or yeah, for 1/2 pints, I'm going to use the processing time for pints. And I'll just go ahead and mention that now it's processed jars at 20 minutes, adjusting for altitude. So that's how long you process, whether you're canning this in pints or 1/2 pints. You may have heard the timer go off. I'm going to turn the burner all the way off. Okay, so now that we've removed it from the burner, we're going to go ahead and add in some cilantro and the lime juice. And I just realized my air conditioner kicked in, so if there's that kind of humming sound in the background, my apologies. Okay, we'll stir that in. And now let's go ahead and fill our jars. And by the way, we're going for a 1/2 inch headspace. This smells really good. In fact, when I was cooking it, roasting the vegetables, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a good one. You can just, sometimes you could just tell when something's cooking that it's going to be good. And I think that this will have a really awesome flavor. Okay, there is a little bit left, but let me debubble this and then we'll check the headspace. I can already tell this one's probably going to be too full, and maybe a couple of the others, but if so, we'll just spoon it out and again just put that in the fridge and we'll eat it maybe today with our lunch. Okay, we'll check the headspace, and yeah, that one is a little too full. This one's really just about right. This one's a little too full. And so yeah, so I do need to spoon a little bit out of each of these, because you do want to stick with the recommended amount of headspace. That's important. Now the good news is this gives me a chance to taste this. I'm going to go ahead and taste it now. Now obviously it's hot and I really like salsa well chilled. So, but still we'll have a basic idea of what it tastes like. Ooh, that's good. Personally, I'm glad I didn't put more jalapeno, that I didn't put the full amount. And as you know, I had a hard time getting the seeds out, all the way out, so it is rather spicy. What I would probably do next time because of that is maybe cut them in half, take the seeds out, and then lay them face down to where the skin side is up on the baking tray, and then I wouldn't have to take the seeds out after I've roasted them when they're all floppy and everything. So anyway, but it is very good. Definitely a little bit more spicy than I would like, but that's okay. Probably for a lot of you, they would be just right, even with the full amount of peppers. But speaking of peppers, one thing that I wanted to mention is that, I think I did mention this early on, but you can use a more mild pepper. And since my husband and I used to like spicy things more than we do now, I don't know if it's just a difference with aging or what, but we don't care for spicy food as much as we used to. But anyway, I would maybe use 1 jalapeno and, a couple of poblano peppers as an example. Okay, so I've wiped the rims. I'm putting the rings on fingertip tight, and then we'll get them into the canner. But the heat level and playing with different flavor profiles and things is really what makes canning your own salsa awesome, because like I say, I can kind of mix and match. I could use poblano instead of jalapeno and get kind of a good pepper flavor without the heat, or I could do a mix and match, a little bit of poblano, a little bit of jalapeno. All right, so I'm going to actually take some jars. I had heated all these pint jars. I'm going to take most of them out, but I do want to run a full canner, so I'm going to leave some of them in. And we'll go ahead and get these into the canner. Okay, so I've got all of the jars into the canner. I have it in the exhaust position, and it's going to stay in the exhaust position the whole time. And I'm just going to turn the lid to the closed position, and then we'll go ahead and set the time for this. Okay, so I'm going to push water bath steam and put in the time. Remember, the time is 20 minutes. However, adjusting for altitude, I need to add 5 minutes on. And I'm going to press start. So hopefully you can see me. I'm not totally hiding behind the canner here. But anyway, what's going to happen now is I'm going to wait for the steady stream of steam, and again it stays in the exhaust position the whole time, but once I see the steady stream of steam, I will push start again and the countdown timer will begin. Now, if you're using a different type of canner, of course, just follow the instructions that are in the manual of your canner, and, you know, in terms of the amount of water and all of that. If you do need more instruction on how to water bath or steam can in the Nesco canner, how to heat your jars in the canner, I'll be sure to link to all of those in the description. I have videos on all of those, and I'll link to them in the description. So anyway, I'm going to bring you back after these are all done processing. And also, in the meantime, I'm going to put this into a smaller jar. Actually, I'll probably just leave it in this jar since it's, you know, dirty already. Put it in the fridge once it comes to room temperature, and then I'll taste it once it is cooled down, and that way I can kind of give you a little bit more of a taste test. But what I can tell right now is that the flavor is excellent, and I'm really looking forward to having this in the pantry. I probably will adjust it to be a little less spicy next time. And that's one thing great about these small batch recipes, is if they're not exactly as you want them to be, you can adapt it next time. And I mean, all I have is basically 4 half pints of the salsa. So even if it's like, ooh, this is a little spicy for us, it's 4 half pints. It's not like I made, you know, 10 pints or something, and I have to, you know, get through all of it before I make more. So this is definitely, I can tell you already, going to become one of the salsas that I make because I love the flavor. And anyway, I'll just adapt it to our taste. I'll see you in a little bit. Hello everyone. It is now several hours later, and you can see that I have the finished salsa. I usually record this outro part of my video, you know, mid-morning. I usually record the regular video early in the morning before everything starts happening, and then I record the outro a few hours later. And today I decided to wait until this evening to record it, and the reason is that on Thursdays, and I happen to be recording this on a Thursday, my husband has a Bible study / book club group that meets at our home, and just a few guys, 4 guys total. And occasionally I put out some kind of snack for them. And I had opened a jar of tomatillo salsa yesterday, and as you know, I had some salsa that didn't fit into the canning jar, so I just put it in the fridge. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting to put out just chips and salsa for a snack for them, and then I could also get feedback from them on the 2 different types of salsa. So 3 out of 4 of them chose the Salsa Ranchera, so what I made today, over the tomatillo salsa. The one person that chose the tomatillo salsa liked it because it was mild. I think the Salsa Ranchera was a little bit too spicy for him. And speaking of spice, my husband, when he first tasted the salsa, I gave it to him, you know, right after I made it. He also felt like it was kind of a little bit too spicy, but he enjoyed eating it this afternoon, and it's something that he could eat pretty well. So it was a good level of spice, or maybe we would personally like it maybe slightly less spicy. So anyway, that's something that you can experiment with. It says it makes 4 pints, but I got really just 4.5 pints, I would say, out of it. And so it's great to try it and then make some notes about whether it was too spicy, not spicy enough, that type of thing. Make some notes in the book or wherever it is that you have the recipe, and then you can go back and tweak it to your taste, add it, make it spicier or less spicy, whatever the case may be. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you would like the video, and if you haven't already done so, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.